midnight screams.
I want to tell you about a horrifying experience I had at a hotel in Beijing. In early 2023, I was studying at a college in the Haidian district. Anyone who's been to college knows that by the third year, most students are either looking for internships, finding jobs, or preparing to continue on to university. For me, further studies felt out of reach, so I decided to enter the workforce. As luck would have it, a friend of mine was working at a 5-star hotel near the 301 hospital. I think it was the only 5-star hotel in that area. Through my friend's introduction, I was scheduled for an interview and went to apply. To be honest, as a fresh graduate, I had no idea what I was suited for. I originally applied for a receptionist position at the gym on the 5th floor. The daily tasks were simple enough. Arrange the equipment, help the hotel's wealthy guests, sign up for memberships, 1,888 yuan a month. Anyone who could afford that was truly rich. But when I arrived, the HR department took one look at my appearance and physique and suggested, "You could work at the main lobby reception. You'll meet more people and have more opportunities there." They went on at length to convince me. In the end, I just nodded numbly. So, from the gym, I was moved to the main reception desk. At a hotel this large, receptionists work in 24-hour rotating shifts. My daily job included guiding guests, storing luggage, assisting the elderly, carrying things, and all sorts of other odd jobs. But the perks were good, the hotel food was delicious, the breaks were reasonable, and the women at the front desk were beautiful and cheerful. I liked to work out, and with plenty of free time, life was quite comfortable. When it wasn't busy, I chat with my female colleagues. Life back then was pleasant and easy. In this line of work, if you served the guests well, the tips weren't bad either. On my best day, I received 6 large tips in a single shift. After more than a month, the managers started scheduling me for night shifts. The night shift was actually even easier than the day shift. Many guests who came back late and drunk were very generous with tips. Usually, by midnight, I just had to find a corner in the luggage room or a restroom to catch a quick nap. At the time, I even wondered how such a good job could have fallen to a newcomer like me. But then, just as I'd suspected, strange things began to happen. The hotel was right next to the 301 hospital, so most of the guests were people from out of town seeking medical treatment. The hotel was always bustling with people. There was a restaurant on the 2nd floor and a buffet and hot pot on the 1st, so the atmosphere was always lively. Because of this, I never felt anything was out of the ordinary at first. One night, while I was on my usual shift, the housekeeping department called down. A guest on the 19th floor needed assistance. They wanted someone sent up immediately. Since we receptionists were used to handling such small matters, I went up right away. The 19th floor was the hotel's highest. I vaguely remembered that. I think there was also some kind of equipment room up there, but I had never set foot on that floor before. The 19th floor was mostly high-end suites, what you might call presidential suites. In between these lavish rooms were a few smaller apartments, 1 bedroom, 1 living room, 1 bathroom. The room I was sent to was one of these smaller apartments at the far end of the floor. When the elevator doors opened, I stepped out and immediately felt that something was off. The lighting here was unusually dim. The carpet under my feet was also different, a deep red, the color of clotted blood. While every other floor in the hotel used either traditional Chinese pattern carpets or durable gray ones, this dark red made me uneasy, but I didn't think too much of it. The 19th floor was the VIP area, after all, with rooms costing 10,000 yuan a night. The sales team usually handled guests here directly. I turned into the hallway leading to the guest rooms. Just as I rounded the corner, a strange sensation hit me. I don't know if it was a magnetic field, a negative energy, or something else, but I could clearly feel the temperature drop suddenly. My whole body felt alert. My heart began to pound, and a sense of anxiety, of panic, washed over me. I lost all interest in playing on my phone. I quickened my pace, walking across the blood-red carpet. At the end of the hall, I saw a very beautiful young woman huddled by a door, sobbing. Next to her was a large pink suitcase. I immediately asked, "What's wrong? What happened? Can I help you?" Between sobs, she spoke in broken sentences, saying that there was something strange in the room, that she didn't dare stay any longer and wanted to check out immediately. Hearing this, I hesitated. As a receptionist, letting a guest leave in the middle of the night would get me a reprimand from my superiors. So I tried to calm her and asked, "Well, would it be all right if I went inside to take a look?" She said nothing, just lowered her head and continued to cry. I took a breath and opened the door, but the moment the door cracked open, I instantly regretted it. Every hair on my body stood on end. A rush of adrenaline made my eyes sharp, my mind chillingly awake. My body felt compressed by some invisible pressure. I felt nauseous, a cold that seeped deep into my bones. All these sensations hit me at once, and I broke out in a cold sweat. It was the transition between spring and summer, so the weather was quite hot. Yet, when I opened the door, a faint, cold draft blew past, seemingly enough to freeze my entire spine. It felt like I had just climbed out of an icy pool in the middle of winter and was standing in the cold night wind. But I was a 1-year-old man, and next to me was a girl crying for help. I couldn't show weakness. I tried to suppress my discomfort and stepped into the room. Before me was a high-end suite, decorated in a Chinese style. The lighting should have been a warm, soft yellow, but now it was a sickly, jaundiced color, gloomy and terrifying. I glanced around the living room. On the table was a fruit platter prepared by the sales team, still untouched. Everything in the room looked normal on the surface, but the atmosphere was indescribable, perverse, distorted, demonic. All of those words felt right. It was like something was fundamentally wrong, something that didn't belong here. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe I wasn't fully aware of what I was doing. But I decided to go deeper inside. The living room had nothing out of the ordinary, so I took a few deep breaths to steady my heart and walked towards the bedroom. To be honest, scenes from horror movies were flashing through my mind. Everything that caught my eye made me suspicious. But when I looked closer, the table was just a table. The chair was just a chair. Nothing was amiss. It was only 5 or 6 steps from the living room to the bedroom. I walked quickly. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, the light already on inside. I didn't dare to barge in. I stood outside, peering through the crack, trying to see half of the bed. On the other side was the bathroom. Seeing nothing unusual, I gently pushed the door open with my foot. The moment I stepped in, the same terrifying feeling washed over me, just like when I had opened the main door. Nausea, a cold spine, revulsion, a distorted feeling, as if every cell in my body was screaming a warning. My heart, which had just calmed down, began to race again. In the quiet room, I could even hear it thumping in my chest. At this point, no matter how curious I was, I couldn't take it anymore. I gave the room a quick scan, then immediately turned to leave. And in that instant, as I turned my head, I felt a single drop of water land on my head. I had no time to think. I practically flew out of the room in 2 strides, helped the girl up from the doorway, and pulled her pink suitcase towards the elevator. On the way down, I tried to reassure her. Our hotel is very clean. It was probably just a broken air conditioner. If you're not satisfied, we can offer you a discount. I said anything I could think of, hoping to calm her down. But as soon as we reached the first floor, the girl ran straight outside without a single look back, hastily hailed a taxi, and disappeared. She didn't even go through the checkout process. It was as if she were fleeing a demon's den. I immediately returned to the front desk and reported the entire incident to my manager, but he just remained silent and told me to get back to work. Back at my post, I subconsciously felt something strange on my scalp. I reached up to touch it and found a sticky, dark yellow-brown liquid. At that moment, I still didn't react. I even brought my hand to my nose to smell it. The odor was foul, pungent, and acrid. It was impossible to tell if it was fragrant or foul, but it was definitely not pleasant. As I was wondering about it, I suddenly remembered the cold drop that had fallen on my head in the room. At that thought, a chill ran down my spine. I was starting to get truly scared. I had been standing right in the doorway. The door frame above me was a blind spot I couldn't see. I couldn't be sure what that liquid was, but it was certainly nothing good. I was lucky I didn't look up then. If I had, who knows what would have happened. It's been over a year now. Every time I think back, I get goosebumps and scold myself for being so reckless. My body had been sending me red alerts, yet I still had to go in and see for myself. I've since quit that hotel and now work in e-commerce. Since then, I haven't encountered anything as strange as that again. I am a doctor now, and I swear I am a materialist. But after more than 40 years on this earth, I've come to realize that some things are difficult to explain with science, so strange that they make me believe there might be another world we do not yet understand. In 1997, I had just finished 7th grade and was about to start 8th. That summer was particularly sweltering. Around that time, a strange story was spreading through my rural village in Hunan. It was said that a fisherman on Dongting Lake, while pulling up his net, found a human head. The terrifying part was that the head could speak. The fisherman was scared to death, but the head opened its mouth and said, "Do not be afraid. I am Yang Hui, and I am about to become a god. I need your help. My merits are sufficient, and I am about to manifest everywhere. I will give you 2 incantations, one to invite and one to send away. I hope you will pass them on to the world. Whoever is fated should prepare a basket, place it upside down on a table, stick a chopstick in the middle, and tie a red cloth to the chopstick. On a quiet night, when the moon is bright, Go to the bank of a river or stream that has a bridge and silently recite the invitation chant to call me. Ask what you will, and I shall answer. Afterward, recite the farewell chant to send me back to my place by the river or stream. That summer, after the first harvest and the second planting, I had a lot of free time before school started. Evenings in the countryside were boring back then. After hearing the story, I immediately sought out the 2 incantations from a village mystic, a man who specialized in spreading such mysterious tales. I and a boy 4 years younger than me prepared the ritual as instructed. We used a square table and sprinkled a layer of white lime on its surface for the god to descend upon. That night, following the instructions precisely, we began the invitation. I couldn't hide my nervousness, wondering if it would actually work. But as the chopstick on the basket touched the table, both of us froze. The chopstick began to move on its own. It made a loud sound, not one that could be made by human hands. By then, the adults in the house had gathered to watch. Someone asked, "May I ask which deity you are?" The chopstick wrote out 3 traditional characters. Yang, Hui. We began to ask many things. Around midnight, as instructed, we recited the farewell chant and returned the spirit to the stream bank. Later, when I was in university, living in a dorm with 7 other male students, we had a heated debate one night about whether gods existed. I brought up my old story to prove they did. To my surprise, a roommate with the surname Wang had a similar experience. However, the question he had asked was different from mine. He had asked, "Will I get into university? Which one?" The spirit replied, "You will get into Wuhan University." But in the end, Wang didn't get into Wuhan University. He got into West China Medical University. This started when I was in the 2nd grade. I had a friend, let's call him Xiaoying, who was my age and in my class. He had a younger brother, Xiaobao. Xiaoying was a very handsome boy, a heartthrob by today's standards, and his parents treasured him. In the 72nds, no matter how spoiled a child in the countryside was, they still had chores to do: herding cattle, geese, or ducks, pulling weeds for the pigs, cutting grass for the cows. Back then, outside of school hours, Xiaoying and I were almost always together, herding our geese. He had 2, and I had 3. On the first day of 2nd grade, I asked Xiaoying to go register for school with me. My family was poor, so I didn't have the money for the tuition fee that day. The next day, after my parents borrowed the money, I went to get Xiaoying again. But since he had already paid the day before, he refused to go. I pleaded with him at his house, but he wouldn't budge. By noon, knowing I couldn't wait any longer, I went to school alone. Around 4 p.m., when I got back from school, I heard that Xiaoying had drowned. It turned out that after I left, Xiaoying and some other kids had gone to play at the production brigade's fish pond. The pond wasn't large, nor was it very deep. While playing, the kids spotted a dead fish in the water. Fearing someone else would grab it, Xiaoying jumped in first. But a moment later, he disappeared beneath the surface. By the time the adults pulled him out, he was no longer breathing. His parents wailed until they fainted. From then on, Xiaoying's parents had his younger brother, Xiaobao, herd geese with me. Though Xiaobao wasn't as handsome as his brother, with an ordinary face, He was loved dearly by his parents because Xiaoying was gone. Xiaobao and I became inseparable. 4 years later, when I was over 10 and about to start middle school, I no longer wanted to play with kids 2 or 3 years younger than me, like Xiaobao. I decided to work for the production brigade to earn work points. That summer was brutally hot. One day, Xiaobao and about a dozen other children went to the brigade's larger fish pond to swim. Even though he couldn't swim, he and a few others clung to a float, playing in the shallows. For some reason, Xiaobao drifted alone into the deep water in the middle of the pond. At that exact moment, I was relieving myself in a bean field on higher ground near the pond. When I looked up, I saw a child struggling in the water. I didn't even realize it was Xiaobao at first. I just dove into the pond to save him. I swam over and grabbed the flailing boy. Xiaobao latched onto me, holding on so tight I could barely move. Luckily, I was a decent swimmer. I used the backstroke and kicked hard to get us both to shore. Once on the bank, Xiaobao threw up a lot of water. To avoid a beating from the adults, I made all the kids promise not to tell anyone what had happened. From that day on, I heard that for over 30 years, Xiaobao never dared to go into deep water again. Throughout the 92nds and 2000s, I worked in the burn unit of a hospital affiliated with a central state-owned enterprise. To be honest, our department was quite famous in the region, covering more than a dozen surrounding counties. I personally managed the treatment of countless burn cases, and I believe that some people are truly born with a guardian star. On the 8th of May, 2002, I believe it was a Sunday. The burn unit was quiet, with no critical patients, so I was off at home. Around noon, I suddenly felt restless. A powerful premonition that something was happening at the department and that I had to get there immediately. Without a second thought, I rushed downstairs, hailed a taxi, and sped to the hospital. My home was about 3 to 4 kilometers away. The taxi stopped in front of the inpatient building. I paid and ran up to the second floor where my department was located. From a distance, I saw a stretcher and a few people standing in front of the nurse's station. As I got closer, I saw it was a severe burn case. The nurse was on the phone calling me. The call hadn't even connected yet. When she saw me, she asked in surprise, "Doctor, I was just calling you. How did you know to come?" I just answered curtly, "Nobody told me. How long has the patient been here? Let's get to work." The nurse helped with the patient and said, "He was just brought in. Your timing is incredibly strange." Immediately, the nurse, the family, and I rushed the patient into the emergency room, inserted an oxygen tube, started an IV line, applied ointment, and administered injections. Every step was carried out without a moment's delay. The patient was a man in his 42nd, a temporary worker at the cement factory. He had been burned in a workplace accident. The total burn area was 96%, with 60% being third-degree burns. After receiving initial treatment locally, he was transferred directly to my department. With injuries that severe, the chance of survival was incredibly slim. I should explain that the first 3 days of burn treatment are the critical period that determines life or death. 3 tense days passed. The patient made it through the shock phase but remained in critical condition. On the 4th day, the director of the cement factory came in person, demanding that I save the patient at all costs. I told him frankly that I could not guarantee survival The director discussed the possibility of transferring him to a higher-level hospital. I agreed immediately, saying that the provincial hospitals had better techniques than we did. When he asked which one to choose, I said each had its strengths depending on their resources and the situation. After consideration, they decided to transfer the patient to XC2 hospital. So, on the 5th day after the accident, I personally escorted the patient to the ambulance for transfer to XJ2 hospital to continue treatment. After that, I had no idea whether he lived or died. The following year, I left the workers' hospital. 3 years after that, I moved to a provincial city. One day, I returned to my old workplace to handle my household registration transfer. I went to the old factory district and got into a taxi to go to the workers' hospital. It was rush hour, and all taxis in the area had a mandatory 30-minute stop. While we waited, I chatted with the driver. The driver asked me, "You work at the hospital? What department?" I replied, "The burn unit." Hearing this, the driver said, "The burn unit? Let me tell you a strange story. 2 years ago, at the cement factory, one of our temp workers got burned over 90%. He was sent to your hospital for treatment and then transferred to X2. I immediately cut in. That patient couldn't have died." The driver cut me off as well. "That's right, he didn't die. Let me finish. He was at X2 for over 40 days, costing over 200,000 yuan in medical bills, but his life was hanging by a thread the whole time. For the last 10 days, he couldn't urinate. The hospital basically gave up on him. The family and the factory accepted it and started preparing for his funeral. The hospital said if he died there, provincial regulations required cremation. But since he was from the countryside, his family didn't want him cremated. They wanted to take him home while he was still barely breathing so he could die there. After signing the papers and completing the discharge procedures, instead of using the hospital's expensive ambulance for the 500-kilometer journey, the factory and family rented a covered truck. On the way, the road was so bumpy that halfway through the trip, the patient started urinating again. The more he was jolted, the more alert he became. By the time he got home, he was even asking for food. After just 20 days of simple care at home, with some herbal remedies on his burns, he made a full recovery. Tell me, isn't that strange? After hearing his story, I didn't know what to say. This world is vast, with countless professions. In every field, there are exceptional talents and ordinary people. Some work diligently their whole lives without ever becoming masters, while others become famous at a young age. Why is that? Perhaps it is arranged by fate. Some things are simply not for humans to decide. Before I begin, I must state that all characters, events, and locations in this story are from my own direct experience. Some names have been changed. Before high school, I lived in a mountainous rural area in the north of Guangdong province. My first and most unforgettable paranormal experience happened when I was just 7 years old. In my hometown, there is a traditional custom. Every year, before the Lantern Festival, our clan holds the Thengdang ceremony, a ritual to inform the ancestors of any changes in the number of male descendants. During the ceremony, a troupe of drummers and musicians is hired to play at the ancestral tombs, followed by a grand feast. On that day, such a ceremony was held in our clan's ancestral hall. At around 4 p.m., after the rituals were complete, the music stopped. The adults gathered at my eldest uncle's house nearby to drink tea, chat, and wait for the evening feast. I was a quiet child with few friends and rarely joined in the festivities. After watching the lively scene for a while, I grew bored and wandered back to the ancestral hall by myself. The ancestral hall was an ancient structure, built during the Guangxu era thanks to an ancestor who had achieved high honors in the imperial exams. The court had rewarded him with silver to build it. The architecture of green brick and wood had decayed over time, a sorrowful sight for anyone who saw it. In the center of the hall was the ancestral altar, with memorial tablets arranged in 3 tiers like a pyramid. The walls on both sides were covered with portraits of ancestors, their faces cold and solemn. Since the hall was near my uncle's house where my grandmother lived, I often went in and out to play and paid it little mind. But this time was different. When I entered, no one was there. Everyone was at my uncle's house. My attention was immediately drawn to the set of drums and horns still sitting in the middle of the hall. Normally, these instruments were kept away and children were forbidden to touch them. Seeing my chance, I started playing, enthusiastically beating the drum. Suddenly, I felt something was wrong. My heart was beating erratically, fast, then slow, and I kept feeling the urge to burp. I stopped to rest for a moment, my eyes accidentally glancing at the wall. The entire row of ancestral portraits hanging there suddenly broke into smiles, their lips curling as they looked down at me. Even though I knew they were my ancestors, their strange faces sent a shiver down my spine. I took a few steps back and turned to look at the memorial tablets. My whole body instantly broke out in goosebumps. Right before my eyes stood a towering old man, 3 or 4 meters tall. His hair was a mess, his head nearly touching the ceiling. He wore a long, grayish-blue robe and was holding a large bow used for fluffing cotton. He was bending down low to look straight at me. I was so terrified, my soul nearly left my body. I scrambled and crawled my way out, running straight into the living room of my uncle's house where everyone was gathered. I grabbed my uncle's hand and begged him to come with me to the hall. But my uncle and the others were deep in conversation. Not only did they ignore me, they scolded me for being a nuisance. Before I could recover, I ran into my grandmother's room. Seeing my pale face, she asked what had happened. I burst into tears and told her everything I had seen. My grandmother said nothing. She just leaned on her cane and led me back to the ancestral hall. I sobbed, not wanting to go, but she held me tight, comforting me. When we entered the main hall, I immediately looked at the wall. The portraits were completely normal now. The towering old man was gone. My grandmother lit a stick of incense and told me to kneel. Then, standing before the tablets, she whispered a prayer. Great-grandfather, great-grandmother, this is your 23rd generation great-grandson of the Wen generation. The youngest, named Wen Hao. He is young and doesn't know the rites. He unintentionally disturbed you during your feast. Please do not blame him. Please do not blame him. After kowtowing 4 times, she let me out and mixed a cup of ash water to calm my nerves. As she handed it to me, she warned, "Drums and horns are for sending off the deceased. You must not touch them casually, especially when it involves your own clan. For a little child like you to disrupt the ancestors while they are feasting is like chasing them away. It is a great disrespect." After that day, I rarely dared to step into the ancestral hall again, partly because the atmosphere in there was gloomy and strangely cold, and partly because the image of that tall great-grandfather still haunted me. I was afraid that if I unintentionally did something disrespectful again, something terrible would happen. Not long after the Lantern Festival, my grandmother passed away. I was still young and didn't fully grasp the pain of losing a loved one, so I didn't feel much sadness. The funeral went smoothly, with nothing strange happening, except for one night when I dreamed of my grandmother smiling gently at me before quietly turning away. A few peaceful months passed. I went to school, came home, stayed late to study, and gradually forgot about the strange things that had happened. When summer came, I and a few friends started roaming the village, getting into mischief everywhere. We even secretly stole cigarettes from adults to try and act grown-up. On the day it happened, I, Xiao De, and Ah Lun planned to meet at a deserted spot in the village to smoke. The place we chose was the ancestral home of the Chen clan, once a prestigious family in our village. It was a massive, tiled, 4-story building that looked incredibly grand. The adults said the Chen family was once renowned in the region for its scholars. During the Republic era, many of them migrated to Nanyang, what is now Southeast Asia, and became successful, which is why the house was so elaborately built. But in recent years, the family had declined. The wealthy had settled abroad, and the elders had either passed away or grown frail. The ancestral worship was gradually neglected. Furthermore, the area lacked water and electricity, so no one wanted to live there anymore. When I arrived, Xiao De and Alun were already waiting by the wall of the Chen family's courtyard. We all took out our cigarettes, puffing away awkwardly, but trying to look sophisticated. Xiao De said, "My dad told me not to play here. He says it's haunted." I was startled. "Really?" Alon let out a scornful laugh. "Coward. If you're scared of ghosts, you'll never get a wife. I heard my dad say there's a lot of treasure inside, all left by the Chen family's ancestors, glistening gold and silver." Hearing that, Xiao De's eyes lit up. He urged, "Hey, let's climb in and take a look." I felt it was wrong. Stealing was a crime after all. But Xiao De was used to petty theft. Even the cigarettes we were smoking were ones he had scrounged from someone's house. He snapped, "What's there to be afraid of? No one lives there. It's a waste not to take anything." With that, he rolled up his trousers and prepared to climb in through a ground floor window. I was assigned to stand guard at the main gate. It was a large, 2-panel wooden gate, locked with a chain as thick as a wrist. I felt something was odd. Why would an abandoned, empty house need such a massive chain? I went closer to inspect it and was immediately shocked. It wasn't an ordinary iron chain. Carved into every link were scriptures and talismans, written in a deep, crimson cinnabar. A sense of unease grew within me. I bent down and pressed my face to the crack between the 2 wooden panels to look inside, and I froze. This was no abandoned house. In the vast courtyard, I saw hundreds of people of all ages, packed shoulder to shoulder. The scene was like a bustling market, but strangely, there wasn't a single sound. It was utterly silent. Terrified, I turned and ran back towards the window to warn my friends, but it was too late. Xiao De and Alun had already climbed inside. "Get out of there! It's full of ghosts!" I yelled, but there was no reply. I called again, my voice now a trembling whisper. Suddenly, from inside, came a sharp crack, like the sound of rotting wood breaking. It was followed by Alun's horrifying scream. Just a few seconds later, Alun stumbled back out through the window, his face covered in dust, tears streaming down his face as he sobbed uncontrollably. Without a word, he grabbed my hand and we ran for our lives. The villagers, hearing the cries for help, rushed to the Chen house. People climbed through the window to find Xiao De, eventually pulling him out. His arm was broken and he was unconscious. He was rushed to the hospital and only woke up 3 days later. Alun, though he escaped, later developed a strange skin disease. I didn't dare visit him, but I heard his whole body was covered in festering sores that left a multitude of scars. As for me, the one who seemed to have gotten off lightest, I just got a severe beating from my mother. After that incident, we rarely spoke of it again. I only knew that Xiaode's father had once said with a grim face that the house was truly haunted, because he himself had seen things. I later learned that the place wasn't so much a haunted house as a spirit gathering place. This was because many generations of the Chen family, especially those who had settled abroad, wished for their fallen leaves to return to their roots. Before they died, their ashes and spirits were brought back to be enshrined in that very house. If my family's ancestral hall had only 3 tiers of memorial tablets, the Chen family had dedicated half of their main hall to them. They were stacked 20 or 30 tiers high, packed as densely as a dark mountain. The walls were covered with countless portraits from paintings of the Qing era and black and white photos of the Republican era to modern pictures too many to count. Stepping inside felt like standing in the underworld. The cold, heavy air made the hairs on my skin stand up. Perhaps it was because so many spirits had gathered there, with so few people left to worship them, that the villagers eventually started calling it a haunted house. In fact, that house was once the center of a major event. I remember the historic flood of 1998 that caused devastation everywhere. My hometown was no exception. Back then, most of the houses near the river were built with earthen walls. When the flood waters rose, the earth soaked through, and the walls dissolved and collapsed like mud. Because we were in a remote area, no one came to help in time. Many people died. My house was on higher ground, so we were lucky to escape. After the water receded, many houses in the village had been completely washed away. The great Chen house, built on high, solid ground, was undamaged. Out of a sense of community, the Chen descendants agreed to let the homeless villagers take temporary shelter in the long-abandoned house. The once desolate and cold place suddenly became bustling with life. To be honest, the peasants in my village were very pragmatic. The moment they set foot inside, they began fighting over the best spots, claiming the kitchen and seizing the well. They argued so loudly over these petty things that it was embarrassing to watch. Among those seeking shelter was a madman named Huang, who had also lost his home in the flood. None of the villagers wanted to give up a good spot for a madman. He was chased away wherever he went. Finally, with nowhere else to go, Huang spread his mat and slept in the main hall, right where the Chen family's ancestral tablets were kept. At first, I didn't believe anyone would dare sleep there. But one day, when I was bringing rice to a relative staying in the big house, I saw it with my own eyes. It was the first time I had properly entered the house. My God, almost every room was occupied. Large families took over 2 or 3 rooms. The sounds of people, pots and pans, and washing collided, creating a chaotic noise like a slum. From a distance, I saw Huang sitting alone and dazed in the middle of the main hall. I was astonished. The rumors that he slept there were true. I walked closer and teased him. "Hey, Huang, you really dare to sleep here?" He didn't answer, his face as blank as a ghost's. No matter what, I thought, sleeping in the main hall, surrounded by hundreds of memorial tablets, couldn't be pleasant. Normally, Huang was a strong man. He once stole watermelons from a field, and it took 3 or 4 men to restrain him. But now, he seemed like a different person. For several days, whenever I passed by, I saw him sitting motionless, his clothes filthy, ignored by everyone. Curious, I got closer. As I approached where he was sitting, I froze. The tiled floor around him was covered in feces, a liquid filth so foul-smelling it was unbearable. He hadn't even taken off his pants. He had just relieved himself on the floor, his expression soulless, as if he were no longer human. Horrified, I backed away, yelling, "This is a tiled floor, not your dirt hut, you lunatic." As I was shouting, Huang suddenly turned his head. His face was completely transformed. His eyes were bulging like a cow's, his skin a deathly gray, his expression terrifying beyond words. "What are you looking at?" "I'll beat you to death." His voice was a low, heavy growl, like steel scraping against stone. I stood stunned for a moment, then fled without looking back. Some of the nearby villagers heard and just cursed, "Leave him be. Even if he dies, it won't be in this house." I began to feel uneasy. Normally, Huang, though a fool, was harmless. He never flew into a rage. When children teased him, he would just smile foolishly and walk away. But this was different. As you might have guessed, Huang had likely been possessed by something unclean. A few days later, this was confirmed. I didn't witness it myself, but people in the house said that during the day he was catatonic, but at night he would howl, destroy things, smash water jars, and curse everyone, accusing one family's daughter of being a whore, another of poisoning their neighbor's chickens. Although no one would admit to such things, I thought that if they were true, it wouldn't be surprising. Regardless, the villagers, living under the same roof, couldn't accept the possibility that Huang might go berserk one night and harm them. The next morning, the Chen house was in chaos. People were screaming, children were crying, things were being broken. Finally, the villagers had to call for the village exorcist, the only one who knew a bit of magic, to help. After assessing the situation, the exorcist nodded in confirmation. "He's been possessed." He immediately ordered some strong young men to cut a large branch from a peach tree and bring a fishing net, while he himself walked into the main hall with a handful of salt. The entire house seemed drawn to the scene. People crowding around the hall in layers, packed so tight it was hard to breathe. I was in that crowd, my heart pounding, so tense I barely dared to breathe. The exorcist stood a few steps from Huang and sprinkled salt towards him. At that moment, Huang was lying flat on the tiled floor, disgustingly filthy, his face caked with feces, urine, saliva, and snot. His eyes were closed, but his chest heaved, his breathing rapid. He clearly was not asleep. The moment the salt landed on him, Huang shot up like a spring. "You want to mess with me?" he roared, his eyes bloodshot, glaring at the exorcist as he bit out each word. The exorcist remained calm and asked, softly, "Who are you?" Huang's whole body trembled. He hissed through his teeth, "You don't know who I am, but I know exactly who you are." The crowd held its breath. The exorcist calmly pulled a stack of paper talismans from his pocket, lit them one by one, and used a hand fan to waft the ashes toward Huang. As he did, he said, "If you have a grievance, speak it plainly. I will help you if I can, but you must not harm innocent people." The scene was indescribably bizarre. A man was talking to another man, yet he wasn't speaking to a human. The villagers stood around, not daring to move. Huang was silent for a long time before he spoke again. "No one makes offerings. I want to eat a chicken. After I eat the chicken, I will leave. But when I leave, I'm taking 3 people with me, not one less." The words struck everyone like a hammer blow. But what was more terrifying was that the voice was not Huang's. It was clear and articulate, with no sign of a madman's speech. His eyes shone as if they were on fire. The exorcist nodded. "A chicken is easy. Your descendants are still alive. I will tell them to prepare a full offering for you tomorrow, but you must not harm anyone. Everyone has suffered from the flood. Their homes are destroyed. Your descendants have accumulated merit. You should protect them." The conversation went on for quite some time. Many years have passed, and I don't remember all the details, only that everyone was silent, not daring to interrupt. Suddenly, Huang leaped up and screamed, "That bastard pissed and dirtied my house." His words left everyone stunned. In our local dialect, "that bastard" was a vulgar curse for someone deserving of death. He was referring to himself. In the end, Huang was a fool. He was lazy and couldn't even be bothered to go to the outhouse at night, choosing instead to urinate right there in the main hall. This wasn't his house. It was the sacred place of the Chen ancestors. To do such a thing, it was no wonder he was being punished. But he was a madman. Who was there to blame? There was no other way. The talismans were all burned. The fishing net and peach branch were ready. The exorcist turned to the crowd and shouted, "Anyone born in the year of the goat or the dog, get out! Women on their monthly period, get out immediately!" Though his words were aimed at a few, I saw almost all the women quickly retreat. Some had to leave, others were just too scared. In the end, only men were left in the main hall. The exorcist sighed. "Given the situation, I'm afraid we can't save this fool." He began to perform some strange gestures in the 4 corners of the hall, perhaps some kind of sealing or pacifying ritual. No one knew for sure. As for me, my heart was racing, my face flushed. A powerful intuition told me that something immense and horrifying was about to happen. Returning to the center of the hall, the exorcist ordered the strong young man nearby, "Use the net to hold him down tight, and use the peach branch to beat him until it leaves." I jumped. What? Was this really happening? The scene that followed is something I still dare not recall too clearly. 7 or 8 young men threw the multi-layered nylon net over Huang. Then, 3 or 4 others mercilessly beat him with wooden staffs made from the peach branch. The relentless thud of the staffs echoed, and blood splattered everywhere. I only dared to glance twice Before quickly looking away, Huang was unbelievably strong. He struggled so violently that he tore through 3 thick layers of the nylon net. The screams that tore from his throat made one's skin crawl. At times his voice was a deep, masculine roar. At others, a shrill, feminine shriek. No ordinary person could scream like that. Some of the curious onlookers had to back away several meters, unable to bear the sight. The thick, coppery smell of blood filled the house. As for me, I had already run out of the Chen house, away from the crowd. But those terrifying screams haunted my mind for a long time. That evening, I heard that Huang was still alive. They beat him until he started to cry. Then they stopped. He had several broken ribs, and his leg was also broken. He was vomiting blood ceaselessly. No one knew how much longer he would live, but at least the spirit had left his body. Huang's parents had died long ago. He had no relatives and lived as a vagrant, collecting scraps to get by. After the beating, he could no longer walk. The refugees in the house, seeing he had no money and no family, took no responsibility for him. It was as if nothing had happened. Everyone remained silent. Only the exorcist, the one person with a shred of humanity left, carried him to a small earthen hut on the mountainside. Every day, he brought him a little food. This went on for 2 weeks. Huang died. He had no coffin, only a straw mat hastily wrapped around him and a few stacks of paper money burned as an offering. To this day, many people don't even know where his body was buried.